Welcome once again to our show, and this is Frank Avila, your host, and today we have a very interesting show, very exotic topic, but perhaps very on point in today's news and for our world today. And we have Usama Alshaibi. Thank you very Alshaibi. Thank you very much for being on our show. And I'd written it down beforehand, but nonetheless I mispronounced it. Usama Alshaibi, not Osama, but Usama. And you're a filmmaker, as I understand.
I'm a filmmaker, right.
Okay. Are you locally here in Chicago?
Yeah, I'm from here. Been living here for 15 years now.
Okay. Now, you certainly have a U.S. accent, but where were you born?
I was born in Baghdad. My father...
Baghdad, the capital of Iraq.
Baghdad, Iraq. My father is Iraqi, and my mom is Palestinian. She was born there, but fled the country when she was really young, in '48. And so, yeah, I'm Iraqi.
That's interesting. This is a point on your mother, because this last week, Israel celebrated their 60th anniversary. And the Palestinians, or perhaps all of the Arab community, including Christians, had what they refer to as al-Nakba.
Right, the catalysm.
The disaster.
The disaster, yeah.
However you translate it in Arabic. So it's interesting that you come from both an Iraqi and a Palestinian heritage.
It's true. It's not. It's two countries that have had a tumultuous past. Two countries that have had war. Iraq more than.
Now, is that your mother in the photo?
Yeah, that's my mom.
Okay.
Yeah.
And your mother's still alive?
Yes, she is.
Okay.
My mom lives in Colorado now. Okay. And my mom, it's funny because my mom was really upset that I went back to Iraq. And we'll get to that, but I went back and made this movie, and because she spent her whole entire life helping, trying to get us out of these war-torn countries and into the United States.
But did you actually live in Iraq, or did you only go for the purpose of making the movie?
No, I lived there. I mean, I was born there. I grew up there. I went to public schools there. My father came...
Now, when you say public schools, what is the nature of a public school in Iraq? I'm sure it's not the same as a public school here in the United States in terms of the same concept, separation of church and state, I'm assuming.
Well, it's not that it was so much religious. It was more, it felt like a Saddam Ba'athi propaganda kind of school. I mean, they did have education, but...
So you were born then after King Faisal, then...
Oh, yeah. I mean, I grew up when pretty much Saddam was in office, and was there when he invaded Iran. So I was in south of Iraq when Saddam Hussein invaded Iran, and I was there during that war. And
there's a very famous photo, she had it, you should put it on the screen, where Donald Rumsfeld's meeting with Saddam.
Yeah, in the 70s.
And,
he's our guy.
And Donald Rumsfeld met with Saddam during the time that we tried Saddam for crimes that, during the same contemporaneously, that Donald Rumsfeld had met with him, and that we were supporting Iraq. In the Iran-Iraq war.
That's right. We were supporting. In fact, I remember when I was a kid, my father telling me that the United States was on the side of Iraq, that we were on the good side, because Iran was the bad guy back then. And I remember that clearly, thinking the U.S. is supporting us, and that Saddam is on the side of right, because why else would the United States be supporting him? Not until later did I sort of figure out who Saddam was. And, I mean, Saddam was an egomaniacal dictator. I mean, we can't forget that. But a lot of...
committed very many atrocities.
Right. And, it's ironic, that what we've done to Iraq, we say that we want to give them freedom, but in fact, there are actually more freedoms in many ways under Saddam Hussein than they are now. And
I want to talk more about you, but let's just talk about this very briefly. Is that when you grew up in Baghdad, I know that Baghdad also had a large Christian population.
It does.
And, or it did. I think usually have left since '03, or even before that, but certainly under Saddam, and that Tariq Aziz was a Chaldean Catholic, and there were some ancient churches dating back to the 7th or the 8th century that even withstood the Mongol invasion of Baghdad and sacking of the city. But was Baghdad fairly cosmopolitan when you were there?
Yeah, and I remember growing up, I remember I mean, my parents had several Christian Iraqi friends. I don't remember much of distinction between the Muslims and the Christians. Everyone was more nationalistic. Everyone's more about being Iraqi.
Because that was the Ba'athist philosophy.
Yeah, and religion wasn't really. I don't remember, not until like I lived in other places like Saudi Arabia where Islam was kind of pushed on me more. But in Iraq, like, I don't remember ever going to a mosque. Rarely did I see Quranic prayers on TV. It was a really rare thing to see anything religious.
But you did have a public call to prayer, at least in certain parts of Baghdad.
Yeah, but it's not like in Saudi Arabia where all the shops shut down. It's just there and people go on with their business. It's not such a big focus as I would say it is right now. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I would say now it's become more religious, more fundamentalist. You see places where women can freely walk outside with skirts and not have to cover their hair. That's the way it's always been. Now these same areas, you have kind of a religious police that's enforcing
Your
things.
father was Shia?
Yeah.
Okay.
And my mom was Sunni.
Your mom was Sunni. Are you a practicing Muslim?
No.
Okay.
I'm not. I would say I'm closer to an atheist.
Closer to an atheist.
I am an atheist.
You are an atheist. Okay.
A recent atheist.
Recent atheist.
Yeah.
So let's discuss that a little bit. What made you be an atheist?
Mm-hmm. Several factors. I mean, I've always...
So you don't believe in God at all. You're even
Right.
beyond an agnostic.
Right.
That has doubts. You have no doubts.
I don't believe in the Abrahamic God, the God that I was sort of told to believe in, Allah, God, you know. But I'm not saying that I necessarily, like, I'm replacing it with anything else. I'm just saying that type of belief I had, I no longer have.
And Abraham was from Iraq or of Chaldea.
Yeah, I mean, all like Judaism, Christianity, Islam, they're all
monotheistic.
Yeah, and they're all similar. They're all like many of the stories are the same. You know, in Islam they say Jesus, Moses, they're all prophets, and Muhammad was the last. Mm-hmm. You know, and Allah just means God.
Now, even though you're an atheist, there's been other directors who were agnostic or were not practicing their faith. Some that come to mind were Martin Scorsese, or even more, because he didn't play it, but Francis Ford Coppola. But you do see, like in the Godfather film, the baptism scene where you have the aesthetics of Catholicism, which can be quite beautiful, or even in the Dracula film, kind of Eastern Orthodoxy with the Romanian Orthodox priests, that you can see quite a bit of the color and aesthetic of the religion. Does that play also into your films?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I jokingly also refer to myself as a Muslim atheist because a lot of the culture that comes with the religion is so entwined that it's hard to separate that. You know, what is culture, what is a religion, what is Arab, you know? And so I would say, I mean, my interest is pretty deep in that religious and sort of mystical element to the East, to Islam, to the art, the music, absolutely. It can be religiously based. Some of it is, some of it isn't. And keep in mind, a lot of the traditions in the Middle East are pre-Islamic. A lot of the things people think are what Arabs do because of the Quran actually have nothing to do with the religion, have a lot to do
Judaism or Christianity or Babylonian or Gnostic.
Yeah, and I mean, the tribes in Arabia pre-Islam were all pagans.
Well, there were Christian tribes also.
There were Christian tribes, yes.
The Lakhmids or Nestorians or the Ghassanah.
And the Jews actually were in Medina. Those two Jewish tribes that were warring. Muhammad helped.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how did you become a filmmaker? Let's talk about the film side.
I have a background. Ever since I was a kid, I was always interested in art and painting, and I was, you know, good with that, good with drawing and painting, and I thought that's what I was going to do and did well throughout high school and studied that briefly in college. But growing up, college was difficult for me, and I was very restless. And
where did you go to college?
I eventually finished my degree at Columbia College, but
here in Chicago.
Here in Chicago. But before that, I went to the University of Iowa briefly. I lived in the East Coast briefly. I studied painting, photography, and from the photography, it led me to film.
Okay.
And it just seems to me like film is the most contemporary art form we have.
Now, just based on very superficial, your dress, your accent, you seem very Americanized.
Because I came here young.
Yeah, so you came here how young?
Like kindergarten age.
Okay. So you've lived here most of your life. And where did you live? Here in Chicago area?
My father was sent actually by the Bot government to finish his PhD in Iowa City. Small college, liberal town where I grew up, and then we went back. And so part of my childhood was here, part was in the Middle East, and then I finished high school in Iowa City.
Did that juxtaposition provide any kind of cognitive dissonance or some kind of identity crisis within you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So were you Iraqi, you were American, you were Western, Eastern, what?
I don't know if it's so much the title. I think it was more the feeling. Like, I mean, definitely when I was young and we came to the United States, I knew that we were different. Like, I knew our family was different compared to what I saw around me. And keep in mind, like, there weren't a lot of other kids that had darker skin or were from other countries, maybe one or two in a class.
But if your father was in a PhD program, I'm assuming you were around fairly
Other
educated
students.
people.
Right. But I was, you know, it's funny because when I was here, I felt like, oh, like people are like, Usama, what kind of name is that? I was like, oh, I'm from Iraq. And, you know, I'd have to explain.
Did 9/11 even hurt your name further?
Well, everyone knows my name now. It's like, you know. But here's the funny thing is when I go back to the Middle East, I was no longer really Arab. I was the American.
Okay.
So there's that constant sense of like, well, where do I belong? But I think now, after getting my citizenship and being here and just kind of being more of an adult, and since 9/11, ironically, I got my citizenship after 9/11, and I felt more American since 9/11 than I ever have.
So you're an American citizen,
I am.
United States citizen. Okay. Now, you were saying how you got in films and you were restless and you ended up in Columbia. We were talking a little bit about the show, and we've done some shows here, and we have both of us are associated a little bit with Out Obsessions.
Out of session videos. Yeah.
Videos, and we've done some shows here on movies. We did one on blaxploitation films with Joe Rubin and Boise Edwards. We did another just on Out Obsessions and movies in general. And I said I liked Capra, Alfred Hitchcock. I like Martin Bormann very much. Admiral Forrest. He did. I think he also did. He did Excalibur, but I think he did one with Burt Reynolds and where they're taking the trip down the river.
Deliverance.
Deliverance. Yeah. I think he did that one also, and there's a couple others that I didn't realize he did. And actually, on Obsessions, they corrected me because I thought that Bad Lieutenant was a Quentin Tarantino film, and it's a Ferrara film. Who did one of my favorite films too of that genre, which was King of New York with Christopher
great
Walken.
movie. Yeah, he also did Dangerous Games with Madonna.
Okay.
Yeah, he's someone I admire. Ferrara's good. He's dark. I like that stuff.
Yeah. And so, who are some of your motivating influences? Because most people get in the film because I watched Star Wars when I was 5 and I loved it, or I watched a black and white, you know.
Well, I did watch Star Wars when it came out, and it was quite an experience. But I never really. It took me a while to sort of understand that I could sort of do this. But I wasn't trying to make Star Wars. I was really influenced by some of like the diary documentaries that I saw, that kind of style. I've always been interested in documentaries. Errol Morris is one that I've always admired.
What would be a film that Morris may have done?
Well, Errol Morris is most famous for a movie called The Thin Blue Line, where he actually got a case overturned and he freed a man that was wrongfully convicted for a murder. So that's where a film kind of goes beyond just a film. He won an Academy for another film called Fog of War. But one of the ones I really like is this documentary he did called Vernon, Florida. It was just a small town in Florida. And I like that his message wasn't always so clear. It wasn't just these sort of typical documentaries. Other filmmakers like Kaveh Zahedi, who is a Iranian filmmaker who did a movie called I Am a Sex Addict, which is sort of this confessional diary documentary that I really admired. Another filmmaker named Christopher Wilcha, who did a documentary called Target Shoots First, and he's now actually a director for the new This American Life TV series. So in the documentary realm, there were a few, but I didn't really feel like that was something I wanted to do. I liked the element of.
But you do actual full-length films and music videos.
I do, and I've definitely I've been influenced by some of the Dogma movement that came out, like Lars von Trier, those guys, and really by the city, like some of the filmmakers here, like Tom Palazzolo is from Chicago, great short filmmaker, kind of unknown, and John Hughes, all the famous '80s Breakfast Club, 16 Candles, Home Alone, all those. But really, I think it's more. I guess I wanted to make something different. I wanted to make something personal, and that's really what Nice Bombs came out of that. I had the equipment, I had the connection, I had an opportunity to go back. And it's like, I mean, there are filmmakers I admired, but, I also read a lot, and I like to listen to music, and sometimes I was just like...
Now, how did you get to go back? Did you still have contacts with your family or your father's contacts in the Ba'athist government?
Yeah, well, no, he doesn't have any contact with the Ba'ath government, because the Ba'ath government was
dissolved
against him.
Oh, they were against you?
Yeah, that's the reason we couldn't stay in Iraq, is because they wanted him to join the Ba'ath party, and he didn't want to.
Okay, but Saddam, but the Iraqi government at the time wanted to get a PhD in what field?
Business administration.
And they wanted to come back and some kind of...
So, yeah, we went back, and we were going to have this life, but then the war started, and they wanted him to join, and he couldn't, so we escaped. We left the country, and ever since then we haven't been able to go back. So it had been 24 years. My father's in Jordan. He's like, look, I have this opportunity. We can drive into Baghdad. I'm like, drive? It's like, yeah, we'll drive, because there were no planes or anything back then. It had only been 9 months since the United States invaded. It hadn't even been a year. And I was literally taking a shower, and I just heard this voice that said, go, do this, and come back, and you'll be fine. And I told my wife, who's from Kansas.
No, maybe the voice was God, but I know you don't believe in God, so.
Maybe it's my voice. But then I just decided, I got to do this.
Okay, now tell us, set us up a little bit, because we're going to see a trailer from your movie, Nice Bombs.
Right.
What is Nice Bombs about, without any plot spoilers?
Nice Bombs is a story about me returning back to Baghdad with my wife and my father. We had not been back in 24 years.
Now, your wife is not Arab, Iraqi, or Muslim. She's a white American.
She is. And she had never been to the Middle East. And we were actually just been married for a couple of years.
So your wife just said, hey, I want to go to Iraq with you?
Well, I didn't want. I told her, look, you're going to be a liability. This is really dangerous for you. You're this white American girl. You're going to stand out like a sore thumb. What are you thinking?
And did she?
Yes. But we're looking back now at everything that's unfolded. But in 2000, it had only been 9 months. There were a few kidnappings. There were a few bombings. But I thought, well, let's give it a shot. I mean, it was a risk. And I was willing to take it. She didn't want me to go by myself because she thought, well, if something happens, I want to be with you. And so we went. And it's just a story about me. I left the country when I was a boy, and I'm returning as a grown man with my camera. I'm connecting with relatives that I haven't seen. I'm also trying to understand my place, what's happened to my country.
Is this sort of like Barack Obama's book, Memories of My Father, where he's trying to re-identify with his Kenyan roots that he never knew?
I don't know. Yeah, a little bit.
But you actually knew some of your roots.
It's my family, and that wasn't so foreign. It was just being back. Like, oh, I was born in this place, Baghdad, but I could never go there because I was always afraid to go back.
Because your dad had said no to Saddam, and Saddam is not a man you say no to.
Right, and also when the Gulf War started, they wanted me to be in the Army.
Gulf War I.
Yeah, so that was another, they had requested me to join the Army, and I didn't have an American citizenship, I didn't have any status, so it was real dangerous. It's one of the reasons I actually got political asylum in this country, is when the first Gulf War started, the Iraqi Army wanted me, and this country was about to kick me out. So I was in a really dangerous situation. That's why I got. So there was a lot of resistance to go back. I mean, really, my impulses were like, don't do it. But my curiosity overtook me, and I said to myself, well, Frank, I didn't have my camera off the whole time. I just kept it on. I just shot everything I could. And in some weird way, I think having that camera kind of helped me emotionally, like deal with everything, because I had something to do. I had a purpose, you know. I wasn't just sitting there.
So this movie is about you going back to Iraq.
It's about me going back, and it's about me trying to figure out. It's ironic because the only reason I was able to go back is because of the war. I mean, if the United States had done nothing, we wouldn't be speaking to each other right now because I would not have an opportunity. I thought when I'm an old man, maybe I'll go back to Iraq. So no one expected that he would be out. So, but coming back here and feeling like, oh, like I'm an American citizen, but this country is attacking my home country, like, and so like when people speak like we invaded them, like who's the we? Is it me? Who do I identify with? You know, the Americans. So it's a little bit about that. It's a little bit like trying to come to terms with that, trying to understand what's happened to my country, trying to understand what's happening here within that 2-year period.
Let's take a look at the trailer. It's Nice Bombs, a film by and about Usama Alshaibi.
I haven't slept in 2 days, having weird doubts about this whole trip. I keep thinking about death and Kristie's death and my father's death and all of us dying in one giant explosion.
What was going through your mind when I said 9 months into the American invasion that I'm going back?
I told you, you know, I mean, I will never forgive you.
We are on our way to Baghdad.
My camera want to kiss your camera from the cheek.
It's a war, it's an occupation, and it has been messed up really bad.
Yeah.
We are sheep and they are wolves.
What are you?
Hyena.
What about Bush?
I love you too, Bush.
You want to say something to George Bush?
Yes.
What?
Quit.
Don't come back to Iraq. Stay in America. Okay.
Even if you think of coming, not now.
Self-bomber make the Americans stressed. They cannot trust any Iraq.
دعانا المنادي لساح الجهاد فرحنا جموعا نهز الوجود ونمضي جنودا لله الجليل
Boom. Boom, boom, boom.
You know, I saw in the beginning of the clip when we were talking about on the break that you had some of that very traditional Arabic music. I kind of like it. I think there's a Doors song. I want to say that they do it in This Is the End.
Yeah,
or the end that they had the exact same riff. Maybe it's an ode. Tell us what an ode is, and tell us. I understand you got some of the local area Middle Eastern musicians to play in the movie.
Two guys I know, Naif and Isa, who are classically trained Arab musicians. They wrote the music. They're actually, what you're hearing are traditional, specifically traditional Iraqi songs that are played that some Iraqis would even recognize. And then we also had some stuff that was just written for the movie. I had several musicians work on the soundtrack. But yeah, that was really important for me to get some of that more traditional Iraqi style music in the piece, because you know it's famous, Iraq is, for its music.
I also saw that you had some interplay on the bombs going off, kind of juxtaposed with other images. Tell us a little bit about that. Was that your fear of your own destruction? Because you mentioned that you were thinking about you and your wife dying.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up during the Iraq and Iran war, and definitely like after 9/11, things were feeling very, very dark and violent, and it seemed, in a strange way, it was familiar because it did remind me of my past, and in a strange way, like I was kind of, I don't want to say comfortable in the war atmosphere, but it was like that anxiety kind of helped me just be hyper aware of what I was doing. In terms of the trailer we just saw, constantly when I was in Iraq, there was that kind of negotiating, like, well, we're going to go to this part of town, how risky is that? And like, well, you know, if we walk out in the open, there's a possibility of kidnapping, there's a possibility of random violence, of just bombings that would just happen constantly. It's weird because, like, for your own safety, it's not good, it makes you uncomfortable, but for the sake of the film, it's actually more interesting when things get bad, you know. But so there's a constant, like, you know, we have to be careful, but at the same time, I want to go to this market with my dad and take my camera and my wife. She may have to cover her hair, or we may get weird looks, but I did it. Now, I don't think Iraqis would be as open and keen to talking with me, you know.
Because this was only 9 months, you said, after.
Yeah, and there's this sense that maybe things were actually going to work out okay.
But you were interviewing people, and some of them said Bush to go home.
Right.
But it would seem that your family would be more pro the invasion to the extent that they were against Saddam and you had to leave.
Right.
And certainly, certainly Saddam killed, and you said your father was Shia.
Yeah.
That certainly Saddam had a very harsh policy on the Shia.
Right.
And he committed many massacres and atrocities. His sons were clear sociopaths. I think one with your name, if I'm not mistaken.
No, it's Udi.
Udi, okay.
Close, but he was a big sociopath.
No, there was two of them. There was
and Qusay.
Qusay, okay. Udi and Qusay. And they just seemed like they were complete psychos.
Udi especially, yeah. So Udi was going to be the next one in line to be president, but Saddam's like, Udi, you're out of control. Into drugs, girls, torture. I mean, he's notorious, like, there's stories. I mean, he rapes girls. And you know, the culture over there, it's very conservative. There's a story where he was driving and there was a marriage, and a man and woman just got married. He saw the new bride. He said, I wanted her. His thugs grabbed her, and he raped her, and he sent her back. The next day, she killed herself. There's many stories like this, Udi. So, but yeah, they got shot and killed. And you remember when they put their bodies up on the news, it was very controversial because the United States criticized like Al Jazeera for showing dead American soldiers, but they went and showed Udi and Qusay to prove to the Iraqis that they were killed.
No, so wouldn't some of them or some of your families or the Shia view Bush as the liberator?
Well, yeah, because, like, I mean, I wouldn't have been able to go back if they hadn't removed Saddam. If I felt for a second that, like, Saddam may come back, I wouldn't have been in Iraq. I mean...
Because you could have been killed immediately.
I would have been killed or drafted into the military or something. It doesn't matter that I'm an American citizen. And anything could happen. Anything could have happened. So, but that's all they did. That's all the United States did, is they got rid of Saddam. I mean, everything else, it's been a complete disaster. I mean, you can't just, like, how long do you hold on to that? So, like, when I was there, the main problem was, like, violence, kidnapping, no electricity, and no, like, real security. That was 2004. It's 2008. They have the same exact problems. And it's like, you got to give people something. Is it a military solution? I don't know. I mean, my family's position on it is complex. I mean, my father, who's actually living now north of Iraq, he's very much was for it.
By Mosul?
He lives in Erbil, actually, in the Kurdish section. And you know, the Kurds, they almost have like their own country up north, you know. But
so your father was initially supportive of
he was. And I mean, I think Arabs in general are pretty patient, like, we can wait this out. But I mean, you have a lot of the academics and smart folks from Iraq left after the first Gulf War. Now, they're all leaving. And so, like, really, who's left there? I mean, you have, like, 1 million people that have already left. Doctors, professors.
Well, also, one thing I think is underplayed in the press is you had a complete exodus of Christians and other religious minorities that ostensibly or arguably had a better time under Saddam. because you have Assyrians, you have Chaldean Catholics, you have Melkite, you have Eastern Orthodox, you have different...
You have the Turkoman, which are different minorities. Yeah.
And then you have Mandeans and Sabians. It's Iraq, although some of them may be so isolated they didn't. But these Christians are leaving by the droves, maybe millions, but certainly hundreds upon hundreds
They've
of
been
thousands.
threatened, a lot of them. Yeah, yeah. And it's really, you know, I mean, you bring up that Baghdad is pretty mixed. Like, the people I know, some of my friends and relatives, like, it's strange just to see one family that's just one way, like we're all Sunni, we're all this. I mean, most people are mixed. So these kind of religious divisions that are happening is not, I hear a lot of people say, oh, well, it was heading there anyway. It wasn't really heading there. It's been created. And, you know, the Shi'i were the majority, and Saddam was a Sunni, who were a minority. So when they pulled him out, the only people the United States could negotiate with were the Shi'is. And they, because they've been sort of oppressed for so long, there's kind of like an over-Islamication, I want to say, of Iraq.
That was not present on the
Right, that wasn't at all before. So
Saddam was a fairly secular.
Yeah, and so things have gotten a little conservative. That is alarming. That is alarming.
Women wearing the...
Yeah, because now women can't do anything, you know, and so now you have like these religious police that go around. And, yeah, they've just, I mean, they've really replaced it with something. It's not better, it's not worse, it's different kind of bad. You know, it's like, okay, it's not Saddam, but it's like, well, what do you have, how are you going to deal with this, you know?
Now, I also saw in your clip that you had certain Shia images.
Yeah.
They look like that of the 12th Imam or,
yeah, well,
or
you
Ali,
know,
I'm not sure what, but I saw posters and some images of Shia. Tell us a little bit about those Shia images.
So that's, in Iraq, it is one of the 12, I think it's the 11th. It's one of the imams, and they're buried there. So Kadmiya, where there's 2 imams that are buried, it's like a religious city inside Baghdad, and that was quite a trip, because that's like, you know, I was with Kristie, and she had to cover up, and like, you really see the old markets, and you see Hussein and Ali, which is the sort of the main Shi'i saints, all over. I mean, it was like, before it was you saw Saddam everywhere. Now it's like these religious figures are everywhere.
Now, even though Islam is generally iconoclastic, is the Shia seem more into paintings, images, faces, whereas otherwise you do not, it's forbidden to have a face of Muhammad.
Yeah, that's why a lot of the Sunnis don't like how the Shi'is go about it. I mean, they all believe in the same thing. They all believe in the Quran. Muhammad is fine. There was a split when Muhammad died over who was going to be his successor. And Ali is what the Shi'is felt should be the true successor, and Abu Bakr became one. And so there was a split, and that's why you have the Shi'is. But they're a small minority. Our name, my family name, Alshaibi, our family, our roots go back to the gatekeepers of the Kaaba in Mecca. And so like 500 years ago, when my families emigrated to Iraq, so when we came to Iraq and went to this mosque, there's actually, like, they knew us. Like, our family name was kind of famous, so they were, like, let us in, and we're, like, served tea, and, like, kind of treated kind of VIP. Which is kind of funny, because if they really knew that I'm an atheist, that wouldn't be a good thing. But, that's part of my family name, is we have this religious past, so I was allowed in to these mosques and was able to shoot. Normally, you know, you wouldn't have that kind of access. And the Shi'i images, yeah, they're everywhere, and they have various rituals that were oppressed. One of them, Ashura, you see them when they beat they beat the backs, and that's kind of like, it's their guilt because Ali was killed, and they feel guilty for it because.
And they do plays.
They do plays, yeah, and especially like in Iran. You see a lot of these Iranian pilgrims that come to Iraq. So, you know, you're dealing with, you know, and like, also when I was there, Saddam, Americans forget this, like, people lived under Saddam for 35 years. That's no easy thing to suddenly, like, you pluck this out, this way of life and thinking you've had for so long. If you don't have anything else to give people, people go to their religion, people go to their family.
You sound like Barack Obama.
Usama Alshaibi for president. Oh, because people cling to their guns and religion, is that what you're...
Right.
Well, it's kind of true. I mean, I think he was onto something with that. Because if you don't have faith in anything else, you go to what you know.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that, but let's go to the next clip, which is the Kalia dance. Just set up the clip.
Okay, we were talking about minorities in Iraq. Kalia actually, it means gypsy. And this is really where you'll see some of like tribal Iraqi Bedouin culture. These girls, you could say, are party girls. Some of them are like prostitutes, but it's a little different. It's a little tribal. They're like, they're there to entertain and dance, and they have various dances where they spin their hair, and by spinning the hair, it like charms the space. It's kind of this magical dance they do, and some of them are really famous. But now the Kaliyas are really suffering because of this religious fundamentalism that's happening in Iraq. Their villages are being burned down and all this stuff. Yes, they were also exploited during Saddam's time, but now they have nowhere to go. This is footage that was sent to me and that I also picked up when I was in Iraq, and I sort of put together. This is Kauliya dance.
يلا انزلي عالساحة عيون الدباحة يلا انزلي عالساحة عيون الدباحة يلا انزلي ودقي الكف شعرك على خصرك ملتف يلا انزلي ودقي الكف شعرك على خصرك ملتف يلا 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 يلا
Well, that was very interesting. We were talking during the break how popular belly dancing here now is in the Chicago area. I've been to some Moroccan or Algerian or Arab-style restaurants where they had the nargila or the hookah
Hookahs,
pipe
yeah.
and the dancing.
Yeah.
And I was saying, even when I was in the Middle East, that I saw a wedding, not at a bachelor party, at the actual wedding where they did that. It wasn't that risque. They certainly had much more clothes on than you would see at
Yeah, they
something.
consider, I mean, belly dancing you would see at parties. Oftentimes, women get together and just belly dance for each other.
Right.
If you really study the roots of it, it's more kind of it's a ritualistic, maybe a fertility dance. We don't really know.
I'm sure it's good for the health, too.
Hey, it's always good for the health.
So, you know,
It's good to watch.
Yes, it's good to watch. Now, it was saying on there, it's some commentary, and you were saying that this kind of dancing was kind of flourishing under Saddam, but it's kind of being persecuted now.
Yeah.
And that even some famous ones have gone on to emigrate to Sweden.
That's right. These types of kauliya, these gypsies, would have parties where they would serve alcohol. Incidentally, all the alcohol stores are owned by the Christians. And they would have these parties that would last all night, and some of these girls were available, you know, and they would make alcohol for their guests, and they would have these parties, and they were sort of famous for these, and everyone knew about it and tolerated it. It was not necessarily in the city, certain parts of it, but since we got rid of Saddam, they have been under the threat of more religious figures and gangs and stuff, and they've killed some of these people and have closed, you know, have driven them out of their villages, and so the gypsies are just wandering. Some of them have fled north. Some of them are leaving the country. It's not an easy life for folks or minorities or different tribes that don't fit into the majority.
Well, let's talk about it. Under Saddam, women had the right to vote, although the election seemed to be pretty much a done deal.
Well, yeah, it's all Saddam, yeah.
But in Saudi, for example, women don't have the right to vote.
Yeah.
Women could drive cars in Iraq, whereas in Saudi, they did not have the right to drive cars. And that the burqa or shadora was not mandatory dress. Some women did it, but most women did not.
Most women did not. Maybe if they were near a mosque or around a religious area, that's about it. That's where they would, you know. Growing up, I never saw any of that.
Okay.
As a kid, and there were dancing and parties, but it's not all Saddam. The Middle East in general, towards the 80s and 90s, went through sort of this renaissance with Islam. So members of my family that when they were younger were just more free and open, I'm seeing now they've become more religious. I don't know, maybe some folks can say that's happening in this country too, but I definitely saw it in my family. So,
but in this country, there's still dancing and partying, and there's no government-sanctioned persecution of hedonism or even Epicureanism or anything of that nature. So I would say that's distinguished. But, you know, we were talking about Islam and how it's iconoclastic, but it's developed quite a interesting art and all over the world, really, but certainly in the Arab Peninsula and Persia, India and Pakistan, North Africa, especially Indonesia,
Southeast Asia, yeah.
of calligraphy, of geometric designs.
Well, you know why that is? Because they couldn't show Muhammad. They weren't allowed to paint any of the prophets, and they didn't. It's forbidden. Islam is very hung up on idol worshiping. They didn't want to do what the Christians did with the cross and the painting. They didn't want people worshiping paintings. So they made the text the art. They made geometry the art. Except for the Shia, who had some form of painting. Right. Right. The Shias had paintings of their saints. That was important for them. But you wouldn't see. You remember the whole controversy with these Muhammad cartoons that came out, and there was all this uproar over that. So yeah, they're very sensitive about this. So in knowing that and being a filmmaker that was sort of raised in the West to make films and images, we're always taught to shoot people, to have a character. Who are you shooting? What's your image? Who's this person? And I thought, well, let me make something traditionally Islamic, but using the technology of video and film. And my father, he gave me this book of these Islamic patterns that you're talking about, and I took them and I scanned them and I started spinning them and moving them in ways that you had never seen before. And from that, I created this movie called Allahu Akbar. It's been toured all over the world. And it's funny because it's been on YouTube for a while. It has like almost 60,000, all these hits. It's really popular, and there's this constant war between Muslims and Christians and non-Christians and everyone's fighting over this movie because I called it Allahu Akbar, and I don't know, some people are still.
Which means God is great.
God is great, and there's a lot of anti-Arab and anti-Islamic folks that have gone to YouTube commenting on this movie, and I get that all the time.
So you can find this on YouTube if you put in your name or Allahu Akbar?
Yeah, anything, you can just go and find it. It is up and available. I spent
Well, it's
about a
interesting
year.
because you're an atheist, but these people think, well, you're a religious
They think I
fundamentalist.
am, and actually I have to tell you, when they start saying really nasty things or misinformed things about the religion, I defend it. Just because I'm an atheist, I still have respect for where I come from. I also have respect for other people's belief, and so, I mean, these things are important to me.
Why don't we see the clip, which is Allahu Akbar, which is an artistic clip of geometric designs and calligraphy. Well, that was an interesting clip. I could almost become hypnotized to it. You could kind of zone out, get into a hypnotic state. Now, you said it took almost a year to make that?
It did. It took a long time because I had to scan the images, I had to clean them up, and then I had to move them. And I had also several layers.
They were all handmade, you said?
They were hand-drawn from a book that my father got me from the Middle East.
Who drew them?
It's an artist, like probably maybe he'd be someone like a tradesperson, or they look like blueprints that you could use for many things, from like wall decorations to rugs. They're like blueprints that anyone could use.
And I see some of the same geometric designs though on rugs, on
that's exactly where they're from.
On plates,
maybe
walls,
yeah.
or engravings on columns, or architecture, even non-religious. Just in very wealthy people's homes, or on carpets or buildings, etc.
Except the main difference is that they're static. And that was one of the things that I was really excited about doing this. It was kind of like, you know, I'm always interested in sort of taking something old and sort of reinterpreting it, like, from my culture, and using the technology that we have of today to take, say, something very ancient and kind of look at it differently, look at it in a fresh way.
You know, we only got a minute to go. What I'd like to do for our viewing audience, maybe some of them want to see any of your works on YouTube, or if you have a website, tell people where they can. I know that on Sundance, if people have cable, they can watch.
I did have a premiere on Sundance Channel for Nice Bombs. They haven't repeated it yet, but stand by. They're going to show it again. I do show my work at the Chicago Underground Film Festival that's happens every summer. But you can find me on the internet, on YouTube. I'm under Dance Habibi is my handle. That's Dance Habibi, Habibi. And also my site's called dancehabibi.com. Folks can also go to Google my name, Usama Alshaibi, hit videos, and there's tons of videos of all my stuff out there for the world to see.
Trailers, movies.
Almost many of my current shorts and music videos of local bands I've done here are all up online.
And two of them which we got to talk, there's two local Chicago bands you've done, Water Babies and Mahjong.
Mahjong, great Chicago band. I just did a video for them called Tell the Police the Truth. And I've worked for other folks as well.
Okay. That's about all the time we have. Usama Alshaibi.
Awesome.
I got it right. Thank you very much for being on our show.
It was great having you.
And thank you to our viewing audience for watching.